Don't just stand there teasing me. Now it's time to show.
It's a wonderful afternoon. Hello and welcome to Rubbin Minds. I am Hero Daniels. So let's get straight into it. Post-elections, I think Nigerians are beginning to readjust to, the normal life. And as you know, there are three arms of the government. We have the legislature, we have the executive, and we have the judiciary. All attention had been focused on, who becomes the president, who became governors and all of that. But right now, attention is moving from the executive arm of the government to the legislature. I think the legislative arm of government is very unique. In fact, it is that particular arm of government that differentiates us as a democracy, because if you think about it, in military governments, you have the judiciary and you have the executive. So with the existence of the legislature, that solidifies our democratic setting. One particular thing that is worthy of note is the fact that the legislators have to go through, several steps of making sure that they get into power. It's also a very elective position, and some of them might not even survive in their party primaries. And eventually you make it through the party primaries. Now you have to make sure that your immediate constituency gives you the mandate to go and represent them. In the 10th Assembly, it's a very unique setting because close to 70%, if not more than 70%, are new members. And that's because of the power dynamics that we've experienced in the 2023 elections. And that sort of worries a lot of people in the sense that the legislative arm of government is it's a part of government that needs quite an experience in lawmaking for it to thrive properly. A lot of members in the legislative arm of government, the Senate and the House of Representatives, did not get a re-election. In fact, I do have the statistics. In the Senate, the ruling All Progressive Congress won 57 seats, while the major opposition party, PDP, garnered about 27 seats. Others include the All Progressive Grand Alliance, which is ABGA, with 1, and the Labour Party grabbed 6. New Nigeria People's Party grabbed 2, and the SDP grabbed 2, while the Young Progressive Party grabbed 1, right? And of these numbers, we have less than 30% that were previous serving members. Now, the race for who becomes the Senate president and who becomes the Speaker of House of Representative is on. So we'll be discussing it, but before we move forward to discuss what the 10th Assembly will look like, we need to sort of have a retrospect of what the 9th Assembly have achieved, and if possible, let's go back to the 8th and the 7th Assembly, and let's see how can we avoid the pitfall of the past. Joining virtually is a policy analyst, Dr. Jide Johnson. Welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be with you, and I want to apologize to our viewers for not being able to join live the studio. I tried on my best. I just returned from Kaduna today. I tried on my best, but the road did not cooperate with me. So it's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon.
It's fine. So let's get straight into it. First of all, how would you assess the demography of the 10th Assembly? Like I said in my opening monologue, we have a lot of new members in the Assembly.
Well, for lawmaking, you require experience, you require continuity, and that's why you see that's the arm of government where there's no term limit. Unlike the executive where you have term limit, because the longer you stay in the legislature, the more experience you are in lawmaking and performing other oversight function that is required of the legislature. However, that experience, if you look at our experience since 1999 to date, that experience amounts to nothing in Nigeria, because the present occupier of the office of the Senate President has been there since 2003. A majority of those that have held principal offices have been there, and with the exception of the tsunami that we witnessed in the last election, we usually have over 50% of them returning either to the House of Rep or to the Senate. So as far as I'm concerned, I think this should give us a new fresh leaf, in the sense that what is usually the concern of elected legislator is who becomes the principal officer. We tend to focus more. The battle seems to be more on who becomes the principal officer of either the Senate or the Speaker of the House of the House of Rep. And you could see that we have not, less than 1 week after the gubernatorial election, we have seen people campaigning for the office of the Senate President as if it's an executive position. That is, campaigning for that office is even much more important to them than legislating for the people and for good governance in Nigeria.
Okay, so let's take it back a little bit, because the focus of this conversation is we're trying to see how the 10th Assembly will be much better than the previous assemblies we've had. But for us to move forward, we need to even identify and reassess the 9th Assembly and the previous Assembly. What would you say have been some of the places that they haven't performed so well?
Well, in terms of lawmaking, there's no doubt you can't take anything away from the 9th Assembly, the passage of the Electoral Act, the passage of Petroleum Industrial Bill into an act, another laudable act which is in the area of oversight function and checks and balances that I think that the 9th Assembly has not performed creditably well in terms of checks and balances. The framers of the Constitution and those that design the type of government that we practice ensure that there will be separation of powers, and then there will be checks and balances, so that one arm of the government does not become too powerful than other arms of the government. So when you look at the 9th Assembly, and that's why some have termed or branded the 9th Assembly to be rubber stamp assembly, because everything that is brought by the executive seems to be rewrote through the House of Rep and the Senate, the House of Rep under the leadership of Bajabi Amila, and the Senate under Senator Lawan, and a lot of people had misgivings concerning that, and that's why they were labeled a rubber stamp. Because for democracy to thrive and for you to have good governance, the legislature must serve as a check, not as a stumbling block, but as a check on the excesses of the executive, must provide a counterbalance effect in such a way that the interests of their constituents are well represented, because in actual sense, they are the true representative of the people, because they are elected on constituent basis. In all of the arms of government, the composition that majority of the members, that the citizen has a hand in it, is the legislature. The citizen don't have a hand in the judiciary. The judicial officers are appointed. The citizens don't have a hand in the executive, with the exception of the chief executive officer.
Right.
Every other members of the executive are appointed by the chief executive officer. So we said in democracy that the legislature is the representative of the people. But how far have they represented the people? That's another question.
Okay, so these three arms of government are independent, or supposedly independent. But like you said, the assessment of the 9th Assembly has tilted more towards the direction of, because it's almost because the ruling party has the control of both the Senate and the House of Rep. It looks like there's no strong opposition, as opposed to, you know, a particular assembly when we had like the opposition as the head of the Senate, right? Do you think that party politics is, because it looks like everything is hinged on whoever the ruling party decides that, oh, this person is supposed to be Senate president, we need to make sure that we get our own person there so that there's a free flow. So how do you think we can really sort of enforce that check and balance, irrespective of whatever party becomes the Senate president or the Speaker of House of Rep?
Well, for the first time, we have a dynamic representation in terms of the configuration of the Senate. You read out the figures. We are having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 political parties having representation in the Senate now. In the past, it used to be dominated by 2 or 3 parties, but now we have 7. And also, we are also seeing for the first time whereby a party does not have overwhelming majority We have seen situations in the past whereby almost two-third majority, the party that controls the executive seems to have two-third majority. However, the reverse is the case now. We could see the spread. And going by the Electoral Act, if any one of them should decamp, which we have been able to deal with the issue of people cross-carpeting after they have been elected in order to partake of the national cake, in order to have an opportunity of dipping their hand into the cookie jar, so they decamp to the ruling party and caucus with the ruling party. That will not happen again. As a result of that, we hope that, because the beauty of democracy is constructive opposition, opposition that provides alternative viewpoint, alternative policy direction to what the government is providing, to what the ruling class or ruling party is providing for the people. So
right.
The composition of this 10th assembly should give us hope, hopefully, that things will, it will not be business as usual, because
right.
The ruling party does not have two-third majority, and then we now have a spread of political party, which we have never had in the past. Now,
yeah. Okay, so let's talk about inclusion. In as much as it is not necessarily stated in black and white that the number 3 man has to be from a particular zone in the country, but let's look at the dynamics. The president-elect is from the southwest. The vice president-elect is from the northeast, I believe. So a lot of people are now clamoring that the Senate presidency should be zoned to the southeast or south-south. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm from the southwest. I don't know what the 8-year presidency of Obasanjo, what is done to the southwest, and I didn't know what the 8 years of Oshibajo's vice presidency, what it has done to the southwest, or the 4 years of Gbajabiamila's speakership to Lagos State in general, and to Surulere one federal constituency. You see, when people begin to micro-zone offices, it is not for the interest of the people. In what way has Jonathan presidency helped an average German? Or in what way has Buhari's 8-year presidency prevented banditry from happening in Katsina State? Has he taken everybody out of the poverty line? You see, when people want to micro-zone office for themselves, to serve their own interest, they begin to say, okay, let's zone it to this side, let's zone it to this side, let's zone it to this side. And I love this classic Michael Jackson song. They don't, look, the political class don't care about you and I. What they care about is about themselves. You know how many times the Senate presidency has gone to the east? In what way has he helped the southeastern cause? You know how many times now the presidency, by the result of the February 25 election, the presidency has come to Southwest again. You know what way is it going to? What difference is it going to make? Let's wait and hope and see. As far as I'm concerned, when we use this zoning, sometimes we tend to lose critical element in leadership, which is getting somebody that is competent, getting somebody that is experienced, getting somebody that has the wherewithal to provide direction for the legislature, because we need a vibrant and active legislature. We don't need a rubber stamp legislature. We saw what happened with the 10th assembly. Now, even when people clamor, some of those, because we need to zero it down. Well, if you ask me that, okay, we need to zero it down. The party that presents the Senate president, except something has happened, is the APC. So who are the elected APC candidates from senator from the southeast? The present chief whip of the Senate is from Abia State. He's a contestant now. He's a senator. The chief whip. What does he used to do for his senatorial district?
Okay. Okay, Jide.
So when people talk about that, it's about their own selfish interest, not about the interest of the people.
Okay.
Let the Senate president go to the person that is qualified, that is experienced, and that can deliver.
All right, all right. Jide is all up for competence. I'm also being joined in the studio by Odelia Adio. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for
Very
having me.
quickly, we barely have about 2 minutes left. What are your thoughts about, you know, the principal offices in the Senate and the House of Reps? Do you think there's a need, for inclusion's sake, to zone it to certain zones?
I mean, inclusion and diversity has always been respected at the National Assembly, especially with parties who, you know, have come into power since '99. It's been, you know, the president is from one part of the country and the Senate seat and the House of Representatives seat is zoned to another part of the country. And I wouldn't expect anything different from the 10th Assembly. And of course, I think what many Nigerians will expect from the 10th Assembly, aside from the diversity of its principal offices, is the fact that we need an assembly that is a bit assertive. We need an assembly, because we're going to be moving in some sort of turbulent economic period. Because if the candidate does what he says he's going to do, one of the things is that we're going to remove subsidy, which is going to spike inflation and all sorts of things. So you want a National Assembly that is quite prudent and that will stand on its feet to say that waste will be cut, whether it's from its own end of the bargain and from other ministries that are not productive and cut excessive waste. A National Assembly that will do due diligence in its oversight functions, and a National Assembly that would hold the executive to account. Once we have that kind of National Assembly that also carries out its own agenda to want to make some sort of impact in the 10th Assembly, then we just may be steering, you know, towards the right direction. But if we have some sort of a rubber stamp National Assembly that doesn't have a clear agenda or direction of themselves, who are not assertive, who don't have a clear vision of themselves and a program that they want to implement, who are weak on oversight, who do not manage the purse effectively, and who do not hold the executive to account, I'm afraid that, you know, we just might be dilly-dallying at the end of the day.
But don't you think that it's almost unavoidable in the sense that the president-elect is from a particular party, and even the conversations that have been going around, you know, is still hinged on whatever the decision the party makes, you know, that is what is going to stand. You know, they're waiting for the president-elect to come back for him to make his final decision. So when you hear conversations like that, you begin to now question how independent this 10th Assembly will be if the conversation going around is we're waiting for the president-elect to come back so he can make a decision as to who the party is going to be supporting.
I mean, there's no doubt that the president-elect is, you know, the de facto leader of his party. And his input, of course, is always valuable to his party members. And that's a given. And of course, the National Assembly has to work in tandem with the executive for Nigerians to enjoy the dividend of democracy. So I am not advocating of some sort of adversarial National Assembly that is combative with the executive. Absolutely not. Because they need to work together to be able to deliver the goods, you know, for Nigerians. And so it's a good thing if there's some sort of rhythm between the National Assembly and, of course, the executive to deliver the dividends of democracy. What I'm arguing is that the National Assembly also should have its own sense of agenda and its own sense of vision of what it wants to also imprint in the country. And it's to also do its own part of the job and not necessarily rely you know, on the president to do everything to move the country forward. That's why there's that's why there are 3 branches of government. The National Assembly has its own responsibility, and the leadership of that assembly needs to come into office with a broad vision. It needs to, of course, support the executive, but it needs to do its job. It needs to cut waste across, because it supervises many of government agencies. It needs to cut waste. It needs to promote laws that allow efficiency and effectiveness in government. And it needs to cut down corruption where, you know, corruption you know, are quite obvious. So it has its own job to do and it has its own role to play.
So all of the things you've been saying, these are conversations we've been having from governments to governments, from one dispensation to another dispensation. You talk about cutting down waste. Can we even talk about the salaries that the people in the members of House of Reps and the people in the Senate earn? Should we talk about their allowances? Should we talk about the running costs? When we look at, in fact, it is being said that our legislature is one of the highest paid in the world, So how do you expect them to start cutting down waste when, to a certain extent, it also serves them?
But I think that there comes a time where the leadership of the National Assembly must be willing to commit class suicide, right, in the interest of the country to move forward. And by doing that, it means that there has to be some sort of sacrifice from the leadership of the National Assembly to say that this country, because this country is going to go through a very difficult period, especially when petrol subsidy leaves and when electricity subsidy goes, there'll be very 6 months of turbulent period. And you cannot be living an ostentatious, outlandish lifestyle while people are struggling with inflation and struggling with stagnant wages and very little disposable income. So to that extent, the National Assembly, who represent the people, must lead by example to either cut down basic salaries or allowances or whatever they decide to cut. But they have to cut these things down so that they can lead by example, and not just their own allowances, because they would argue, that what they spend is just a fraction of the entire budget, of the country. But what they need to focus on, obviously, last week there was a hearing and we heard of a ministry that many of us had never heard before that pays over $5 billion on salaries every year. We don't know what they do. These are the places the National Assembly needs to focus on. Perhaps it needs to revisit the Orosen report, cut waste where there needs to be cut down agencies that are not productive, ensure that agencies that are supposed to remit to the federal government are remitting to the federal government. It needs to do its job of due diligence and holding many of these agencies to account. If it does that dutifully, I guarantee you that the country will have a lot more resources within its disposal to actually do many good for the people.
All right, I want to sample the opinion of Dr. Jide, because this issue of cutting down waste is a very, very important one. How do you think we can cut down waste, not just in the legislature, but also how can the legislature effectively enact laws that will make sure that we cut down our wastes?
And this platform with Ayodele, because I was nodding my head as he was talking about all of these issues with specific reference to Orosen report. You see, the challenge we have is the bureaucracy. When you see, one of the things that happened in 1999 that the legislature has not recovered from, even though they have their own major problem, is the issue of furniture allowance or no furniture allowance, when the executive went to town in order to blackmail the legislature, which is an arm of government. If you check the bureaucracy, if you check the structure of the American legislature, there are staff that are employed by senators that are even earning more money than the senators, than members of the Congress, because they need quality staff in order to do the oversight function. That we should focus on. However, like Ayodele pointed out, you see, most of the wastages we have are the multiple or triplicate or ziplicate. Let me even use the word ziplicate. You have about 26 agencies doing the same function under the executive. So we have duplicate of agencies of government, functions that could be performed by one agency. Then each of those agencies, we have heads, we have board, we have all of this. That's where we waste. That's where we have a lot of wastages. And that's why I agree with him that, look, moving forward, what should be the focus of the legislature? We have been annihilated from 1999 to date. What we are going to do is that we are going to cut our own coat according to the size of cloth we have, and we are going to ensure, because we have the power of the purse, we are going to ensure that the executive does not become overbloated, does not become bogus. And once they do that from the legislature by disciplining themselves, by ensuring financial discipline, ensuring due diligence, that's when they can get compliance from the executive. And that's why I agree with Ayo. There's the need for us to cut wastages in government. There is a lot of wastages. There is a lot of wastages. You begin to wonder, what's the essence of Ministry of Aviation? And then you have Ministry of Transport.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Jide. Thank you very much, Ayodele. It's been a very enlightening session. And also, I think it's also very important to note that aside from the fact that the legislature will provide checks and balances to the executive, we, the citizens, we need to be active citizens. We need to talk to all of our representatives. We need to hold them accountable. We need to put pressure on them and say, you know what, this is the direction, this is the area we want you to actually, make sure that you attack.
Welcome
Welcome back. This is Rubbin Minds. Before we went on the break, we were talking about the 10th Assembly and how we can cut down the wastage. And of course, let's see how we can avoid some of the pitfalls that have been experienced in the 9th Assembly and all the assemblies before them. I should have let Ayodele go, but Ayodele, it's very important because you have made a lot of valid points, and I really think this conversation is really, really important. So it's going to linger on just for a short while, right? So we've identified some of the challenges that we face in our current assembly and how the 10th Assembly moving forward can correct these challenges. What are your final words on this particular issue?
I think there needs to be a lot of courage. And I use that word advisedly. There needs to be a lot of courage from the leadership of the National Assembly. You know, I used the word class suicide earlier on because clearly we have a revenue crisis. We have a debt crisis. It's like we're between a rock and a hard place, basically. And you cannot dramatically improve the revenue of the country in the space of 6 months. Of course, exactly, if we pull off the petrol subsidy, we have, about 2-3 trillion naira additional revenue to the coffers of the federal government. But before we do that, I believe strongly that there's another 2, 3, 4, 5 trillion naira on the table if the National Assembly does its job digitally and patriotically, by cutting down on excesses across agencies that are not productive at all. We've seen it work with JAM before. JAM was an agency of government that hardly remitted anything to the coffers of the federal government until they had Professor Moloyede, who started to remit billions of naira back into the federal government, and it seemed like magic. And that's the story of many agencies across the country. People are sitting down on their houses, they are living fat, on government largesse and are not being productive. So I want to see a National Assembly that leans on the agencies of government to be productive, to be efficient, to support activities of government. And those that are struggling to be effective, those that are struggling to be efficient, and those that cannot be productive should not get budgetary allocation from the federal government because they control the national purse and they have the powers to allocate resources to wherever. And if they find that an agency is not being as productive as it should, and it's just an agency that accommodates waste, it should be cut off from the national purse. So there has to be that courage to move this country forward and to treat it like your personal business. That if my business is under so much stress and so much tension, I can't still be flying first class when I can't pay salaries.
Right.
I can't still be sleeping in 5-star hotels when I have debts to pay. Right? So we have to find a way to cut down on all these things.
You don't even want to talk about the convoy, the amount of cars.
It's unbelievable. I dare you. There's a likelihood that they're going to buy brand new cars again when you come in. So these are the things. You're going to buy brand new cars, SUVs. You're going to new furniture allowances, new house allowances. All of these things are humongously expensive. And we need patriotic citizens to say that, listen, I'm going to defer my gratification for 2 years down the line. I don't need the government to buy me a brand new SUV. I don't need the government to pay for my accommodation for the next 2 years. I will hang on just like the man next door in my constituency is hanging on, just like the guy in the next local government who's struggling to survive this high inflation. I can hang on for another 2 years till the economy is better and till the economy can afford some of these excesses.
Ayodele, all of the things you're saying is idealistic, but there's one thing, it's one thing for you to say the ideal thing, it's another thing for us to understand what has been obtainable by virtue of antecedents, which is the realistic thing, right? I think personally, how do you think the citizens can play a role in this? Because I know there's a process for recalling your representatives. Perhaps if the citizens start recalling all of their reps and their senators, perhaps others will sit up. So I don't know if you care to share how the citizens can go through the process of recalling.
I'm not sure I want to raise the hope of citizens about the recall process because it's a very cumbersome process and you may never, there's a reason why nobody has been recalled since 99. It's a very difficult process, very tedious. But I think what citizens can do really is to put pressure on their elected representatives. And we saw this in the last elections. 6 governors could not return to the Senate, even as sitting governors, irrespective of the resources in their disposal. Their people rejected them or denied them a chance of an early retirement in the Senate, right? So the power to elect officials into government, citizens must take full responsibility for that power and to exercise that power responsibly by telling these elected officials that if we don't see your impact in that National Assembly in the next 4 years, you're not going to be going back to Abuja. But of course, the citizens will also have to frame some sort of social accountability mechanism with our legislators and to define how you rank the performance of a legislator, because truly and fairly, a legislator should not be judged by how much sewing machines he can distribute to his constituents or how many grinding machines he can, it's the quality of laws that he passes, the quality of representation that he delivers. Those are the standards by which you should judge a legislator. Unfortunately, we seem to want to judge a legislator by the kind of largesse that he gives. But you see, people know quality representation when they see one. I mean, in Lagos here, for instance, Senator Abiru, that represents Lagos East, put out some sort of fantastic world-class digital IT hub somewhere in Ikorodu. Brilliant hub. Young people are being trained in that place, and when they graduate from there, the sky's their limit. So these are the kinds of interventions that you want to see legislators make that impact their constituents directly. And if we replicate these kinds of brilliant ideas across all the local governments or constituencies in our country, I argue that we'll begin to move forward. But if we continue this tokenist approach, where politicians want to hand out, grinding machines, want to hand out, 2,000-3,000 nairas, to area boys every time they visit their home once a year, we're not going to make any sensible progress. We want legislators who are forward-thinking, who are development-oriented, who are honest, who are diligent, and who are willing to be held to account to represent their people with dignity, and with honesty.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to go on a quick break right now. Thank you so very much for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. There you have it. I think at this point in time, we should just talk about mental health, because post-elections, we have had a lot of issues, and a lot of Nigerians need to sort of readjust to what exactly it's happening in the political scene, and I think everybody needs to sort of calm down.
Don't just stand there teasing me. Now it's time to show it.
Welcome back. This is Rubbin Minds. Before the break, we're talking about the 10th Assembly, and right about now, we're supposed to move on to mental health. But before we get to that, let's talk about some entertainment. All right. As you know, that is one sector that has been making us super proud. We've seen the likes of Burna Boy, Wizkid, Thames all grab, Grammy nominations, and we're doing so well internationally. But before these rock stars, we had people that had paved the way before them, and our guests today, I personally like to call her an OG before IG. The Gen Zs will understand what I mean. We have a very talented, incredibly amazing Yinka Davis joining us. I am such a huge fan. Welcome to the program. So,
do you know how close I am to your gate, and I'm still like traffic madness? I'm so sorry, everybody.
It's fine.
I mean, made a huge blunder. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing so well. Your last performance, I think the last performance I saw you in was Afrif's closing gala night, the awards night, and it was so mind-blowing because you moved from singing to theater to, in fact, arts generally. How have you maintained this amount of relevance for so many years?
I was trying to remember the place you said you saw me. I'm trying to remember what you said you saw me. Oh,
Afrif Gala Nights. Africa film. Yes, Afrif. Yes.
You're not a nice person. How can you go that far? Anyways, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, theater, being such a lover of art, as it were, you continue to you just desire to see it continue. I don't know how to explain it. It's just like we cannot let it die. It just has to make sense. I mean, I'll give you a very, very nasty example right now. He is young, he's alive. The guy came from University of Ife, right? And his name is Ashake. And check him out. So when I got to him, I was so happy. I was so happy when I saw, like, yes, finally, somebody's making sense on stage, because he's bringing that, apart from the fact that he's coming from, like, he's from the west part of Nigeria, he is integral, like somebody who's like, at last, I can now say, yes, we have a good contender for improvisation, name it.
Right.
Contemporary dances, incorporate all of that into entertainment, music. That's it. And that's what he's doing. And I'm not sold out completely. Because I'm still like, what are you doing? What do you think you're doing over here? Sing, stop talking.
Right.
So that's it. But
amazing. So Afrobeat is becoming such a global sound. You see that Afrobeat songs are being played in different countries, different culture. I was in India last month, and one of the highest charting songs in India is Rema's Calm Down. And it was mind-blowing because I saw people that did not understand Pidgin, that did not understand the cultural connotation of the lyrics, but they could vibe to the sound, they could even sing some of the words. And these are people that predominantly speak Punjab and, their local languages in India. How do you think we can sort of maintain this global dominance, and how can we build on what is currently happening right now?
Well, first of all, I would rather, I know the world is calling it Afrobeat right now because of because of the our ancestor, as it were, our ancestor, Fela Kuti, going to be with the ancestors, and then the music that was identified with him was Afrobeat. The music we are playing is not Afrobeat. I'm sorry, the personal, it's just a point. Afrobeat is Fela and Nicola Kukusi. The rest of the sound we're doing is Momimwe, introduction in Yoruba. It's called Momimwe. Sound, the language, bringing language into sound. I mean, have you heard of cavemen? Have you heard cavemen?
Yes.
Those ones are incorporating high life with folk incredible style. They're incorporating high life, which is the normal high life. They're incorporating it with folk. I mean, you can hear the power behind their tunes. That's what I'm saying. So it's not Afrobeat, it's just sound. When the world call it the world, that's the category. And when it comes to Grammy, they call it underworld. It's underworld category. Unless they want to now separate like they said, we're all voting for Afrobeat award in. But why would you say Afrobeat? Just say, if you want to call us African sound, that's fine. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because if you're pegging it, don't peg it. Music is universal. Music is anything. Music is a cappella. Music is language. Music is, you understand what I'm saying? It's what you eat, what we wear. It's never pegged. You can never pigeonhole it. And it is wrong to just give it a name. And that's it. No, I'm sorry, I beg to differ.
Right, and that is why conversations like this are super important.
I'm getting close to you now.
Because
I don't know how
right.
Okay. Can somebody come to the gate so I can run inside and see you?
Sure. We'll definitely do that. But like I was saying, that is why conversations like this are really important.
Thank you.
So that the people that need to understand that you cannot box Africans by just giving us a particular genre, Afrobeats. It's a sound, and music is universal. Thank you so very much, Yinka Davis. Hopefully you make it into the studio as soon as possible. Thank you very much. Right now, I'm going to move on to mental health. You would agree with me that mental health is a topic that is so underrated, especially in this country. And it's so important because we live in a society where we face different kinds of pressure from work, from school. You're driving in traffic, you're probably fasting and playing Top Alabi, and then some delivery guy is about to hit your side mirror, another guy behind you just hits your bumper, and you have to make a critical decision. Should I stop playing Top Alabi and curse the person, or should I just curse the person and get back to Top Alabi? My point is we need to really take care of our mental health, and to discuss this mental health issue is a policy analyst and the founder of Nigerian Mental Health, Chime Asonye.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Good to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much for coming. So, first of all, what is mental health?
That's a great question. First of all, when people think of mental health, they think only a couple of people has it. But like Yinka Davis was saying, music is universal. Mental health is universal. So it employs social, psychological, and cognitive well-being, essentially. So it's not just about physical health. We need to be thinking about people's psychological well-being, their mental state, and how they're doing upstairs, essentially.
Okay. That's very, very insightful. Yeah. Why do you think we don't pay so much attention to mental health, especially in this part of the world?
There's a lot of reasons we don't pay attention to mental health. First, it's just like a lot of vulnerable and minority groups. You know, we think about women, we think about youth. We don't really pay attention to those who have mental health challenges. One is stigmatized. So when most people think about mental health in Nigeria, they think of somebody going mad in the streets, or somebody hurting themselves, or somebody talking to themselves. And I'm not just saying that, that's actually what the polling says. Africa Polling Institute and Epi Africa said it. And it's also a minority. 1/8 of Nigerians have some sort of mental health condition over the course of their lifetime. Only 10% get access to care. So because it's a minority and because it's stigmatized, it's not something we think about when it comes to health. And it's not just people who focus on health in general or on disabilities. Really, it's marginalized in general in a lot of areas. So one of the things that Nigerian Mental Health wants to do, we're the largest multidisciplinary network of stakeholders, organizations, and thought leaders focused on mental health. And we want to make sure it's an important part of the conversation, whether it's in elections and how people are coping right now, post everything that's going on, but generally making sure that folks are really fit. There was another study from MANI, which is Mentally Aware Nigeria Initiative, and Epi Africa also, and it said that 75% of Nigerians, approximately, have acute levels of anxiety. And I mean, it's obvious why, right?
I think it should be higher than 75%.
Well, maybe
because it should be more than 75%.
But I mean, the point is that a majority of individuals who are from the country are having challenges, whether it's the recession or poverty or hopelessness. And so we need to make sure that people aren't just good physically, but they're also good mentally as well.
Okay, so we've seen cases where a lot of people are being pushed to sort of move towards suicide as a result of the pressure. They don't have someone to talk to. Yeah. So how do you think we can sort of stop the stigmatization and let people know that it's okay to actually just sort of speak to someone? It's okay to do therapy.
Yeah, it's okay to say you're not okay. And we need to normalize these conversations. I'm really proud of people like MI who have been helping have conversations. He had a campaign with another organization called Guy, Are You All Right? So if you had a challenge, Guy, are you all right? It's all right to say these things. But one of the reasons it's so stigmatized is laws are expression of our context. And in Nigeria, attempted suicide is criminalized according to the criminal code and the penal code. Right now, you're subject up to a year of punishment in jail, which is not right, especially when we just passed the Mental Health Act earlier this year. If we want people to say, I have a challenge, I have an issue, like the Mental Health Act expressed, we need to make sure that there's help-seeking behavior is encouraged. The World Health Organization says that those who are psychologically vulnerable don't want to talk, don't want to ask for help from their friends or their family because the law is criminalized. So Nigerian Mental Health and our network partners, over 40 organizations have come together, and we launched something called Suicide Not a Crime NG. And we're calling for government, we're calling for actors to really decriminalize attempted suicide so we can make sure that those who are pushed to the brink don't do it. And we're proud, one of the reasons I'm in Lagos today is that the Federal Ministry of Health is working on a national suicide prevention strategy. We're making sure that decriminalization of attempted suicide is part of that conversation, and hopefully we can double down on some of the gains we had with the Mental Health Act.
That's amazing. 7th of April, we'll have the World Health Day. Yeah. How do you think we should leverage the campaign? Because I think it's health for all. That's the theme. Yeah. How can we leverage this campaign to sort of throw and shed more light on mental health?
So I think that we need to push on some of the, need to consolidate on the gains we have right now. The Mental Health Act that passed in January is historic. It was something that was languishing in the federal government for over 2 decades. So we have a new enabling environment that's human rights focused and also brings us back into the modern era. And now we need to make sure mental health is a national priority. So Nigerian Mental Health and our partners, we're actually having a press conference next week on the shadow of World Health Day, which is the theme is health for all, but we don't think of mental health as part of that. And it's just true. When you look at our national mental health budget, our national health budget, only 5% in this current budget goes to mental health. And most of that is to hospitals versus support groups or lay counseling and things like that. So what we want to do is come together on Thursday on the heels of World Health Day and say, what are the next steps with the Mental Health Act? We should do things like increase budgeting for mental health. We should do things like decriminalize attempted suicide. We need to make sure we do things like bring all stakeholders in the conversation. It can't just be psychiatrists or psychologists, but lay counselors, artists even, those who are psychiatrists, social workers, nurses, etc., need to be part of the conversation. In general, we need to make sure that this conversation doesn't just leave us, because a lot of times people who have lived conditions of mental health, they're not part of the conversation. So we need to make sure we bring them back into the fold. And then we want to think about mental health. How do we measure our success? We have an act. Is it decreasing attempted suicides? Is it increased funding? We need to make sure we have clear metrics. So our press conference on Thursday is going to help call for some of these changes, and we hope individuals can sign on. If they're interested in learning more, they can visit us at our website, www.nigerianmentalhealth.org, to get involved, understand what we're doing on Thursday, and hear how we want to make mental health a national priority in Nigeria.
That's amazing. My opening monologue, I said there are lots of factors, that sort of put pressure on us as Nigerians. In fact, in Lagos particularly, traffic.
By the time where I can't even get to your studio on time. So, you see what happened to Yinka.
So by the time you stay in traffic 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours in a day, you come home, you're exhausted, you're agitated, your nerves are all over. What coping mechanisms do you think the average Nigerian can adopt to sort of protect their mental health? Like some sort of DIY for those that cannot readily access a professional.
So this is actually one of the biggest challenge, what you just said right there. You talk about a professional, and that's why it's a problem that over almost 100% of our funding goes to hospitals and to drugs, because some people can't afford drugs. Some people can't afford a professional. So what do? I personally turn to things that are like wellness strategies. So people don't think that music that we're just talking about is a form of therapy. During my darkest days, I went to music and sounds and Afropop from rap and hip hop to help me. You can also do things like meditation and affirmations. We have wellness programming with us. You can have peer support groups. That's important. And we can't take away, especially in our country, faith. People don't think that things like prayer therapy are also a form of wellness, right? So we need to make sure that we look into the body. for strategies, whether it's writing and journaling, whether it's planting, whether it's just taking a break and going for a walk, to reconnect with ourselves. And if we engage in some of these wellness strategies, I think we'll really be better served. Mental health is not just something about drugs and psychiatrists. It's also something about how we can look within ourselves to support our coping.
Thank you so very much, Chime. And those coping strategies, I'll adopt them. Personally, I eat a lot of food when I'm stressed.
Okay.
That helps my mental health.
It works for you. You didn't invite me, though.
Thank you so much. We've had such an incredible time on Rubbin Minds, and I hope you join us next week, same station. For now, bye.